And
Ta-da!
we're on the air.
Yeah,
Welcome.
we gotta have music. Da 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 da.
Good evening, ladies and germs. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Jesse,
I don't know why,
because
but
you don't have the
moving
microphone
on.
stuck in your mouth. That's why.
Moving on.
Yeah.
Welcome
So,
to Two and a Half Opinions.
I'm Frank.
I'm Yishai.
And I'm not the Rebbe. Jesse, you got a little bit of echo there. Do you have something else open?
Not that I'm aware of. Don't know what echo you're referring to.
I think he's trying to intimate that there's a space between your ears.
That might be it. It might be a space between my ears. I don't know. Look, I mean, I've got. I woke up at so early this morning. Got up, started reading, started doing some stuff, and I've been up all day long. Joined an earlier show, which is fascinating and fun. I always have a great time on that show. But I'm looking at the bags under my eyes, going, "Wow, I'm getting old, Frank. What's going on here? I got
No,
bags under
you
my
young
eyes."
whippersnapper. I don't want to hear it. I'm old. Look at my eyes.
Oh, I know. Now we're all going to fight over who's older and who's in worse shape.
Technically, I'm older than you.
But yeah, so it's two and a half opinions where your opinion doesn't matter, but we've got two to take your place anyways. And
Well,
going
the half
along with
opinion takes the place of the audience. That's
yeah,
for sure.
and going along with the motto of twos, we always say on this show that where two or more are gathered, our audience doubles. So thank you for joining us. Hope you're going to have a good time tonight. We're coming into Vaikra. Vaikra. What Jesse? What's going on with Vaikra? How did we go from Genesis to Exodus now to a bunch of list of laws and regulations and holiness and purity and uh, everything else, and then we're going to go into Bamidbar and we're going to start our journey again. What is this, like an interlude? Is this a pause? Is this a station identification break? What's Vaikra?
Vaikra, you're kind of nailing it on the head with everything you're saying, because Vaikra is one of those, well, at least from a non Jewish perspective, Vaikra is one of those weird books because it's just placed right in the middle of everything. While if you look at many Jewish perspectives, they say start with Vayikra, start with the whole book of Leviticus. Read that, you'll understand what Torah is all about, and then you can read the other stories. Because without this tidbit of information, you really don't understand much about what it means to be of Israel.
Well, and that's kind of the point of what you just said right there. Is everything else is a bunch of stories. This is a list of laws and regulations. So this is a list of purity. What's what's purity, what's not pure, what's clean, what's not clean, what's holy, what's not holy, how to sacrifice, when to sacrifice, what to sacrifice, what is a sacrifice, what is a sacrifice, what is an offering, what is sin, what is not. And we go on, and oh, there's no story here in Vaikra. I want a story. I had a story at the beginning with the whole creation thing, and then Adam and Eve, and then Noah, and a tower over here with somebody doing crazy stuff, and then we had Abraham. Oh, that was a story. Wasn't that a story? And then we had a story of Isaac and a story of Jacob, and then we got all these stories, but now suddenly a list of stuff to do.
Chris, are you trying to say that you want a bedtime story?
Yes, tell me a story. I'm tired. Besides that, we start off with all these stories, and we end Exodus with a story. And at the ending of Exodus is we're beginning the journey, because it's all about the journey, right? We're going
Well,
to Israel. We're going to the promised land. Hurrah! Hurrah! Hazak! Hazak!
It
B'nai
also
Hazak! But we're on a journey now, right? Because at the end of Exodus, what does it tell us, Jesse? It says,
it says when the pillar of cloud would rise, the nation of Israel would move from there. When it would lower, that's where they would camp.
So I would think that that's the last chapter, last couple of verses. I turn the page. I'm in a new book, and I'm reading about sacrifices. Wait a minute. Go back to the last chapter. The cloud would rise, people would journey. When the cloud would descend, the people would stop. Now I should expect to read something about a journey, right? But I don't.
Aha!
I
Aha!
don't. There's no
Technically,
journey.
well, technically, you hear that out of Numbers, but that's a book and a half away from here. But
Yeah, but Chris, to your point, where Torah is not chronological necessarily, it's more topical. The rabbis say that Leviticus is given its prominence in the middle of the Torah because they just got the Mishkan put together. Now he's teaching them how to be holy. Then they can start their journey.
Okay. All
I'd
right.
be
Well,
more.
let's go back just a second with that, because that's a good point, Frank. So
If I
what's
wear
the
a hat, nobody will see it.
so what's the setting? Where are we when we open up Vayikra, Leviticus? Where are we located?
We're still in the wilderness.
Where? No, it's a
I'd
it's a
volunteer to
trick.
At the
It's
go.
a
mountain.
trick question
I'd
because you
vote.
actually have to go to the very last chapter in the last couple of verses to find out exactly where we are. That all of this from Vayikra chapter 1 to the very end, where all of this was said. Jesse?
Well, considering the layout of it all, I would assume, based on the previous Torah portions we encountered dealing with Exodus, it'd be somewhere around in the previous Torah portions. Like this is an expansion on what the previous Torah portions in Exodus was delving over, if you will.
Okay.
Just because that's where it's always hyped on in Judaism and in Christianity and in Messianics, that the laws were given at Sinai. So if that's the case, if people are going to hint on that, then what's the possibility of Leviticus essentially being one of those moments of, I gave you the brief synopsis as to what happened here during the golden calf and afterwards. So before we continue the story, let me tell you what all happened so that we understand completely and totally what God taught.
So there you go. So when you go to the very last chapter of Leviticus, Vayikra, in the last couple of verses it says, "And all these commandments and statutes were given to Moshe at Har Sinai," at the Mount Sinai. They hadn't moved yet. They got the 10 Commandments. We had the sin of the golden calf. We got a new covenant.
We got the death of the 3,000 plus.
We've got more instructions, and all of everything from starting here at Vayikra chapter 1 all the way through. All of this is done before we continue our journey, because at the end of the day, it's not about the journey. It's about our relationship with God. And so that's kind of an introduction to where we are. Everything from this point for the next couple of weeks, we're still sitting at the base of Sinai with the Mishkan finally in operation.
That sounds good. I'm trying to concentrate on the actual story. Jesse, you're the storyteller.
Okay, why? What? When was I voluntold?
You were voluntold when you started going, all of this is here and right and now. So
What was will be, and what will be was. Got it. But, anyways, where do we start this? How shall we start this? I mean, we always start with the Torah portion and then go from there.
Well, let's do that. Let's go ahead and start with the blessing. Let's read the first Aliyah, the first chapter, and dig right in.
so when the
Sounds like
plan
we got a
fails,
bunch of digging.
you go back to the beginning. This is the beginning. That's what Fassini said.
Sounds about right. Let's get started digging.
Okay. Careful, you. I'll call the brute squad. You are the brute squad. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher bakar banu mikol hamim v'tan lanu et Toroto. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah. Melech Naaman.
Amen. So, Leviticus chapter 1, verse 1 through 13, read from the English translation of Chabad.org. And he called to Moses, and the Lord spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When a man from among you brings a sacrifice to the Lord, from animals, from cattle, or from the flock, you shall bring your sacrifice. If his sacrifice is a burnt offering from cattle, an unblemished male, he shall bring it. He shall bring it willingly to the entrance of the tent of meeting before the Lord, and he shall lean his hand forcefully upon the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted for him to atone for him. And he shall slaughter the young bull before the Lord, and Aaron's descendants, the Kohanim, shall bring the blood and dash the blood upon the altar, around the altar, which is at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And he shall skin the burnt offering and cut it into its prescribed sections. And the descendants of Aaron the Cohen shall place fire on the altar and arrange wood on the fire. And Aaron's descendants, the Kohanim, shall then arrange the pieces, the head, and the fat on top of the wood which is on the fire that is on the altar. And its innards and its legs he shall wash with water. Then the Cohen shall cause to go up in smoke all of the animal on the altar as a burnt offering, a fire offering, with a pleasing fragrance to the Lord. And if his offering is brought from the flock of from the sheep or from the goats as a burnt offering, he shall sacrifice it an unblemished male, and he shall slaughter it on the northern side of the altar before the Lord. And Aaron's descendants, the Kohanim, shall dash its blood upon the altar around, and he shall cut it into its prescribed sections, with its head and its fat, and the Kohen shall arrange them on top of the wood which is on the fire that is on the altar. And the innards and the legs he shall wash with water. Then the Kohen shall offer up all of the animal and cause it to go up in smoke on the altar. It is a burnt offering, a fire offering with a pleasing fragrance to the Lord.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher natan lanu Torah imet b'kai olam nota b'tukenu. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah. Melech Naaman.
Amen.
So now what,
So
Jesse?
now what? We discuss. We delve.
We kvetch?
I was thinking discuss, delve, everything that usually involves the subject matter of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, but
I was waiting for him to delve. I kept on saying, when is he going to delve? He never delved. I was waiting for the delving.
exactly. But this is interesting. How do we delve onto something like this? We just jump right into an instruction manual on how to do a burnt offering. And if I remember correctly, in this Torah portion, we deal with 3 different types of offering, do we not? We deal with burnt offering, we deal with sin offering, and we deal with what is roughly translated in English to free will offering.
Peace offering.
Peace
Shlamim.
Yeah,
Shlamim.
well,
Go ahead, Frank.
no, your picture froze. You might have been going live and maybe I was cut out. I didn't know which one of us cut out.
You still heard us, right, though?
Okay, so what Jesse just said is that we have
No.
we're introduced to 3 different offerings here. One is the Olah. Olah is usually translated as a whole burnt offering. Olah in Hebrew really means to call up or a rising up, something of an ascension, and it goes to the aspect of the entire animal is consumed with fire and the smoke rises up. And then we have the shlamim. A shlamim is a peace offering. It's usually translated as a peace offering. And the root of shlamim comes from shalom, which is a wholeness. The idea and the aspect of it is that when something is whole, it's at peace. A better way to view this is two individuals coming together and meeting in some type of equanimity or equality, or they're joining together, they become whole, they're at peace. So this is the peace offering. And the third category, or the third type of offering, is going to be the chatat. A chatat is a sin offering. Now, it must be noted, and I think most Messianics understand this, is that the sin offering is unintentional sin. I didn't mean to do this. It was a mistake. I didn't know. I wasn't aware. I stumbled and just made a mistake. It was not on purpose. I didn't purposefully do this. And Messianics have done a proper job in this, in recognizing that there's no such sacrifice for intentional, willful sin. There's no sacrifice. But the prophets and the Torah remind us that truly for any sin, intentional or otherwise, the number one requirement is repentance. You must repent. So, with that, we've got the three types of sacrifices. But Jesse, I want to back up just a second, because as we mentioned in the opening of the show, we had the last chapter of Exodus, the cloud descending, and then the cloud rising up again. And we're expecting a journey in Vayikra. But in Vayikra, we don't get a journey. We get an olah. We offer a whole sacrifice. And it, almost like a cloud, rises up when the cloud of God comes down. We have cloud meeting cloud. The cloud, you could say, and I think rightly so, because the Rambam, Rashi, the sages, they agree with this. Actually, they're the ones that coined the statement, not me, is that the cloud that we see descending at any point in time, whether it be on Sinai, in the Mishkan, in the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting, when that cloud descends so strongly that even Moshe can't enter into it, this cloud is the presence of God. God is in the camp. That's the cloud. We create a cloud through our offering, the sacrifice, and it meets and combines with God's cloud, and we're joined in unison. But we have three categories of clouds that we rise up. Two of them are categorized as free will. The Olah, whole burnt offering, the Shlamim, the peace offering. Those are free will. There is no requirement for this. The only requirement is, if you're going to do it this way. So it wasn't sin that brings about the Shlamim. It wasn't sin that brings about the whole Olah. This is your decision. If you do sin, here's the Chatat. Bring this. So, Jesse, Frank, how do we really get started?
How do we really get started is an interesting question in and among itself, considering you set it up with the Olah, Shlamim, and Chatat. Well, these three offerings tend to be rather interesting in their setup. These three offerings be. Blah. 1 second. Frank, you take over.
I'm sorry. Yeah, there was some distraction in the room with Jesse, and I apologize for that. But go ahead, Jesse.
Okay.
We kind of talk about the show before we get onto the show, and I kind of wanted to do an overview of all of Vayikra, and Jesse and Frank wanted to talk about some specifics. So how about we do this? I'll jump into an overview. Vayikra starts out with Vayikra el Moshe ve'daber Adonai elev me ohel moed lemor daber, which is to say that God called. It actually is Vayek. Now I'm getting tongue-tied, Jesse. Vayikra is he called. El Moshe. Vedaber, and then he spoke. Who did the speaking? Adonai. Elev, where did he do the speaking from? The Ohel Moed. So the Ohel Moed is where the conversation takes place. So the sages pause for a moment and say, wait a minute. From where did he call? And to where did he call? Because we start out, Vayikra, he called. And he called. From where? He spoke to Moshe from the tent. But where did the calling come from? Even more so, where was Moshe when the calling happened? We have no information whatsoever on this. So they treat this as two different aspects. Vayikra, he called. Who did he call? Moshe. Okay, now what? Well, obviously it's implied Moshe responded and God spoke to Moshe. Why is this
So there was
important?
a phone booth in the middle of the Sinai desert?
Yeah, and why is this important? Well, it's important because this wasn't something inside Moshe's head. This wasn't a feeling, an emotion. This wasn't, Moshe just got overwhelmed, and then he came to the people, you know what? The Holy Spirit came on me, and this is what the Holy Spirit is saying. That's not what's happening here. It's very specific, and I think it's specific on purpose. God called, Moshe responded to that call. Wherever Moshe was in the camp, he was in his tent, he was out wandering around, he was kicking some stones. It didn't matter. God called. Moshe responded. Where did Moshe go? He went to the tent of meeting. This wasn't internal. This was two people talking together. Moshe went to the tent. Now we're going to have a conversation. There's a difference here. And this is why God said that there's no prophet like Moshe. Moshe I speak to face. Any other prophet, it's going to be in a dream. It's going to be in a parable. Ooh. Those from Christianity and Messianics are very familiar with parables.
Or a vision.
It's not going to be a parable. It's not going to be in a dream. And it's not going to be in a vision. I speak to Moshe face to face like friends speak to each other. That's what's our setting here. This isn't a feeling. This isn't a thought. This isn't, you know what? I've had this so many times, so I'm not trying to play it down. I'm not trying to make fun of it or put it on some base, mundane level. But I've had that impression that God is speaking to me. I've had that impression. A lot of us have. I'd almost be fearful if anybody in the audience did not have that impression. But not so with Moshe. He got the calling. That might have been an impression. Maybe. I don't know. The crux is he spoke to Moshe from a specific place, the tent of meeting. This is no longer emotions. This is no longer an impression. This is actual, factual reality. He spoke. Moshe heard it. It wasn't internalized. And everything that follows is from the point in view of the tent of meeting, where God dwells. So we start off with the Olah, we go to the Shlamim, we go to the Chatat, whole burnt offering, peace offering, then sin offering. When we continue on in Vayikra, we'll find that when we get to Aaron, the order of these sacrifices are reversed. Aaron starts off with the sin sacrifices, then the Shlamim, then the Olah. That's from man's perspective. This is from God's perspective. So it sets the tense and the pace of how do we start out. Last week, the cloud descended. Where are we now? We're in the cloud. God is here. We're not journeying. We're not moving. We're not going anywhere. God stopped. It's not about the journey at this point in time. Now it's about listening to God. And God gives us his perspective on the Torah. That's how we begin Vayikra. That's a different take than anything else you're going to read throughout the rest of Torah, Tanakh, the New Testament, or Brit Hadashah, or anything else. This is starting out with God's perspective, speaking from the cloud to Moshe. I see the Olah. I see the Shlemim. I see the Chatat. Go ahead, Frank.
Well, so this is a communication between the Most High, blessed be He, and His creation. So could it be similar to in the dew of the garden, in the mist, the Creator speaking to Adam? Similar?
Oh,
Maybe?
absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And we're going to get similar similar analogies, similar words here. Really, what's really crazy is we're coming up to Purim this week. On Wednesday, we'll start Purim, and we're going to read the Megillat Esther. And when you read the Megillat Esther, it is all over the place in your face. We're back in the garden and at the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Everything that goes on with Esther and Haman, boo, and Mordecai and the king, it's all right there. It's in the garden. So it's fascinating that we're reading the beginning of Vayikra and Esther 1 week after the other. We're
We're in the second month of Adar. We're in Adar 2 right now, right? If I remember.
Yeah, and I'm digressing here, and I shouldn't do that.
Well, but the Feast of Purim, we get verschnicket. So okay, so this is, and the picture's not swapping back and forth. I'm having to select who's speaking. But so this is God's communication to Moses, and then Moses' communication to the rest of us, right?
Yes. And we talked about that. Vayikra el Moshe. We saw the opening words, and this is God speaking, and it's speaking from God's perspective. That's really the crux of what I wanted to hit on. Is this is from God's perspective. Later on, we'll get it from man's perspective, but right now, this is God's perspective. And so, God calling, He's initiating a bridge, a bridge between the gap of purely spiritual, purely holiness, purely God, and man, physical, in a physical realm. The calling is the bridge of this gap. And then we're going to speak. Then we go into the sacrifices immediately. I mean, we just jump into it. And I want to touch on this briefly. Judaism does not have animal sacrifices today for various reasons. Judaism comes with all excuses and all reasons, and they're all valid. They're all true. Christianity offers us Jesus as the final sacrifice that does away with Moses and his teachings. I'm pausing for effect. Messianics come in and they attempt to bridge the gap with Yeshua. But even there's a certain stumbling around these animal sacrifices, because Christianity teaches that all sacrifices are sin-based. Well, we just read here in this first part of Vayikra that no, the first two categories of sacrifices have absolutely nothing to do with sin.
Exactly.
Only 1/3 deals with sin. And with that, we'll go into categories. So Messianics do a decent job here, and they bring up the aspect that, well, the Torah only offers sacrifices for unintentional sin. They're correct, absolutely correct. Unintentional sin is the only sin that there's a sacrifice, a high-handed or an intentional. I thought about this. I knew what I was doing. I rejected the warnings, and I went ahead and did it anyways. Guess what? There's no sacrifice for that. And so Messianics offer up Yeshua as the sacrifice for that sin, which I'm not disagreeing with. Don't want to go into that because I don't want to offend, even by mistake or accidentally offend anybody with what I would say in that regard. But here's the fun thing. Years ago, it must have been 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, I had a conversation with Brad Scott and Boaz Michael. Boaz Michael's First Fruits of Zion. Both of them very, very smart, very learned individuals. I love and respect both of them equally. And we were talking about sacrifices and the sacrificial system in light of Yeshua. Several opinions were offered up, and we weren't concerned with our opinions as far as what do we do with these sacrifices, because I couldn't help but to stumble over the problem and the complexity with the whole sacrificial system as it's introduced to us in Vayikra. But even more so, I've got this whole thing of Ezekiel. How many of us have really read and studied Ezekiel? Ezekiel presents to us the third temple. And the third temple, there is the prince. Now, Judaism, Christianity, and Messianics, we all agree. The prince is the Messiah. But in this third temple, and Ezekiel is very specific, very explicit, the prince offers up sin sacrifices, Olah sacrifices, Shlamim sacrifices. The prince, the Messiah, is offering up sacrifices in this third temple. I've not found, and I've looked for, I've not found any satisfactory answer to why would the Messiah offer up any sacrifice for Christianity when Christianity says Jesus did away with all sacrifices. Why is the Messiah coming back now and starting the sacrificial system? Now, there's branches of Christianity say, well, the sacrificial system was for salvation, and then Jesus comes along, and now we don't need sacrifices for salvation, but when Jesus returns, then sacrifices will come up, but they'll come back as a remembrance. A remembrance? That makes no sense at all. Why would I kill an animal just to remember something? Sorry, that one just doesn't make sense. Messianics say, well, Jesus did away with, or he paid the price for our intentional sins. But the rest of Torah still is in effect. Judaism says nothing about Moshe ever went away. It's still valid today as it was yesterday and will always be. And Ezekiel's temple is proof of this. The prince in Ezekiel's temple offers up these sacrifices. But there's one sacrifice the prince in Ezekiel does not offer up. In fact, it's not even mentioned. So this is my challenge to anybody that might be listening to the show. Run to Ezekiel and look it up and see if you can figure out what sacrifice, what offering is missing out of the long litany of sacrifices that the prince offers. I'll tell you this, it is a lamb. But as we read in this Torah portion, a lamb, a male lamb, is not acceptable for sin. The Olah, okay. The Shlamim, yeah, okay. For sin, it's a female goat or female lamb. And then we go down from there to birds, and even to the aspect of if you're still too poor to even provide a bird for your sin or for the Olah, then you can bring a grain offering, and we'll go into that. What I want to introduce to you.
Well, Chris, at one point real quick.
Go ahead, yeah.
Didn't Yeshua say, not one jot or one tittle shall pass from this law?
That's what I read.
Okay,
to me, it's cut and dry that the law of Moshe doesn't go away. Nothing changes. Nothing changes as a result of Jesus being here, his sacrifice, his resurrection. Nothing changes. That's how I read it. because he said until all things are fulfilled. Obviously, not all things are fulfilled because not all Jews have returned. The Messiah is not the King of Israel, and we don't have all the rest of the promises of Messiah being here on earth. So not all things are fulfilled. Therefore, nothing has changed with the law of Moses. So the law of Moses is still pertinent today.
Okay, Jesse, don't forget, you got to jump in here sometime.
You trying to remind me of jumping in?
Well, you know.
Well, finding places to jump in whenever a rather properly prepared explanation comes to mind has been interesting to say the least. But it did bring to mind something that I had come across this morning, whenever it came to studying for Vayikra, and that was the more concepts on sacrifice in the light of individuals, different people, different sections. If you pardon the phrasing for Israel, sections of government. And that led to a rather interesting play of understanding. Now, granted, this teacher who I had come across grew up during the time that both you and my father, Frank, would understand very well. No, I'm not saying Frank's my father. Don't give me that look, Papa.
I was going to ask because that was the same way it came across to me.
Oh my word. No. No. No, 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 no. Nothing against you,
Don't
Frank.
worry, my son. I'm here to confess your sins.
Nothing against you, Frank, but I'm glad I have the father I have.
Hey, cool with me.
but anyways, the teaching given was hinging on subjects indicating situations with say the leadership of Nixon during the Watergate scandal. And this was the primary source for this teacher's description, this teacher's explanation. Because in the studying of Vayikra, one of the sages, Rashi, makes a rather interesting statement based on the way that based on the way the leadership sacrifices are presented. In Vayikra, there is a section saying, if a leader of Israel sins unintentionally, commits one of all the commandments of the Lord, which may not be committed, incurring guilt, and it continues what sacrifice they are to bring. Well, Rashi later on says, fortunate is the generation whose leader does not hold himself too high, but rather gives intention to bringing an atonement offering for his unintentional sins. And it's an interesting play on words discovered in there as well, considering that the 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 dealing of the sacrifices is a play on words on the words um, asher and asheri, which asher is the use of the word that, which is what was used in Hebrew during the discussion about a leader of Israel.
Okay, Jesse, if I may,
I sound like I'm stumbling, don't I?
Yeah, a little bit. I know what you're talking about because you and I talked about this earlier. Go to the verse that you're referring to. Let's get a reference point here.
Okay.
In Vayikra, we're going to talk about certain sin sacrifices that the people are going to bring. And if someone sins it unintentionally, this is what you do. And then we go into the guilt offering. And the guilt offering is if someone was quiet. Now this is interesting. if at the point in time when they should have said something and they said nothing, or when they were under oath and they didn't present what they actually saw or what they actually heard in the court of law. So it's like Frank is being accused of something, and he calls me as an eyewitness, and he says, "Chris, you saw the whole ordeal. You were there. You know I'm innocent, right? You know what I said. Tell us what you heard." And I'm silent. That's a guilt offering. And then we go into the other aspects of a guilt offering. And then we go into now when the people have sinned. The people. And the sages question this. What do you mean by the people when everybody sins? When and where and how could the entire nation sin as a whole? Oh, it's when the judges rule. When the judges say, this is allowed, but that is not. And they do this unintentionally by violating Torah. In other words, if they come up and say, well, a little piece of pork is okay, but not a great deal of pork. And so people start thinking, okay, well, I just had a little piece of pork, and that happens to be bad. And God says, nah, no, sorry, you missed it. And so there is a sacrifice for that. And then it comes up with the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. When he makes an unintentional sin. But then the last one is when the king himself unintentionally sins. And Rashi comes back because it says Asher Hanisi. Asher Hanisi. Asher means that king. So the idea is when the king at the time sins unintentionally. That's what Asher means, is that king. However, there's another word that means fortunate. And the other word fortunate in Hebrew is Asheri. Same spelling, but with a yod at the end. Asheri, how fortunate it is for the people when the king humbles himself and recognizes that he has sinned and he brings a sacrifice. Now what Jesse's tying together is there was, and Frank, maybe you can go on with this, there was a interview after the Watergate fiasco and after Nixon resigned. Who was it? David Frost does an David Frost does an interview with Richard Nixon, and through this interview, David Frost is kind of getting bewildered and befuddled because some of the things that Nixon is saying, and so David Frost wants to make sure he's getting it right, and he says, "So what you're saying is that when the president breaks the law, it's okay?" And Richard Nixon responds,
when the president does it, it's not illegal.
Yeah. Richard Nixon responded, when the president does it, it's not illegal by virtue that he's the president. Well, that goes against Torah. Torah says, no, I don't care who you are. You're not the king. I'm the king. So with that, Jesse, I just wanted to try to clarify some of the things you were saying there. You were all around it, and I think you were being distracted a little bit, but go ahead.
I guess it was a session of 50 thoughts at once, considering the fact that, at least when it comes to navigating Chabad.org, I think they've begun setting up situations where you are not able to use their Torah portion during the Sabbath. I mean, their website during the Sabbath. But anyways, the understanding that I was led to with that description, with that statement from Rashi about how fortunate the generation is for a king to point out his faults. I'm paraphrasing now, but it is fascinating to see that you keep doing that and it throws me off. It is fascinating to see such a direction, such a level of understanding, because a leader has a role has a position. They have a direction that they are trying to take a country, a group of individuals. It's almost like if they were to sin and make a mistake, it would be like putting a stumbling block before the blind, as has been quoted quite frequently around many individuals. And that is the subject matter that I'm sorry, my brain skipped 2 beats. Sorry, go from here. Go from here. I'm
Okay, so it's the subject matter that what?
As I said, my brain skipped 2 beats. So 1 second. Just run.
All right, so the whole point is still coming back to a king. Wow, I've got a bright light behind me, and you can't see my face. So maybe
It's
that's a
the
better
light
thing.
of God descending upon you, my son.
That's what it is. The whole point is that in the garden we have Adam and Eve, and they transgressed. Now, the simple meaning of the word transgress is they crossed over. They crossed a boundary that was not theirs. How did they cross this boundary? God said to them, "The entire garden is yours. All the trees, all the trees are yours except this one. This tree is mine. This one belongs to me. This is my area." So we've got a nice house, and we invite people over, and you have free reign in the house. I mean, Frank, you've been here. You want a drink of water? The glasses are over there in the cupboard. You want something out of the refrigerator? Go eat, enjoy, sit down. The bathroom. I mean,
You look
upstairs, downstairs.
in.
Yeah, wherever. You got free reign in the house. That room over there, that's my wife's bedroom. Don't go in there. You can go wherever you want to. Backyard, front yard, attic, garage. I don't care. Have fun. Enjoy yourself. That room over there, that doesn't belong to you. Off limits. Adam and Eve said, "We've got everything, but that one's forbidden. It's the cookie jar for the kid, you know? Don't touch that." Ooh, now suddenly I want it. I want it.
You mean you lust after it?
And if I want it, therefore I can justify to myself that I can have it and it's good for me. And that's exactly what we see out of Hava in what she's saying at the tree. Well, it's good to the eye, it's pleasing to the eye, and I can see that it's going to taste good, so therefore it must be good. Well, it's not yours. We crossed the boundary. Here we have a king, the king of the nation. God has given, because God already told us, he rises up leaders and he brings down leaders. So whether it's Richard Nixon or Ronald Reagan or Bill Clinton or Obama or Trump, God raises up leaders, and he raises them up for a purpose. So be careful about, I don't care what your leader is, be careful how you speak, because God brought this leader into position. God brings up a leader. And the leader decides, well, this is all mine. I'm the king. And Rashi is saying, how fortunate are the people whose king recognizes that only God is king. This has been loaned to him. He has reign of certain things. As long as he understands he lives within the rules, then the people will prosper as a result of his rulership. When he starts saying that, oh, but that you tell me I can't have, but I'm the king, I can have it. I say it's pleasing to the eye, it's good to the taste, it's mine, it's good for me, I can do it. It might be wrong for everybody else, but I can do it. And that's what Richard Nixon's sin was. He transgressed that area. He thought he was above the law. He thought he was the king and could rise above the law. Rashi's saying, no, how fortunate are the people when the king recognizes that even the law applies to him. That's it.
Okay. All right. We're down to almost 10 minutes. I'm going to take my shot. Okay. 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 Um,
Oh, you're waiting for my permission.
no, I was waiting for you to hear me. I didn't know if you heard me. Because didn't want to step on anybody, if somebody had something to say. In Kabod.org, there's an article. If I can just says the power of an Adam, and I've spoken about it several times in the past on different portions about the spark within us. What this article is talking about, and I'll read what it says here. The book of Leviticus begins, and he called to Moses, and he spoke to him from the tent of meeting to say, speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, Adam, a man, from among you will bring an offering to God from animals. Well, the discussion is, why say Adam when there are other terms for a man or a person or an individual? It's because Adam, throughout all of the generations, is a spark between us and God. It's what allows us to draw closer to God. It's that spark of the divine that comes within all of us, that is placed, I should say, in all of us. And I say at the moment of conception, other people say different. It doesn't matter. So that spark and how we treat that spark allows us to a greater or lesser degree to draw near God, because these sacrifices are so that we can draw near again to God. These sacrifices are a pleasing fragrance, aroma. These are pleasing obedience, if you want to put it that way, to God. So that's really what I want to touch on, is that even in Torah, since we do believe correctly that there's no errant word, right? That when it says Adam, it's talking about the people. In my words, it would be Chris, the nephesh, right? The soul, the spirit. So, yes, no.
Yeah. There's everything that draws breath is nephesh.
Right.
So animals, etc. And here, where we have Adam, it's interesting where we go back and forth between Jacob and Israel throughout the prophets, and then when we go between Ish and Adam in Torah, Ish is man, Adam is man, but it's a different word. And so even the sages want to ask, why do we go back and forth between Ish, which means man, and Adam, which means man? Adam obviously has reference to the first man. Ish would be any and every man. And there was that movie, Noah, who played Noah in that movie, the Gladiator dude, the guy that played Gladiator. Remember the movie Gladiator?
Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe, he plays Noah in the movie Noah, and a lot of people hated it because, from a Christian perspective, it doesn't seem to flow with the Christian teaching, and it seems to go against the Bible. From a Jewish perspective, it brings about a very Zohar effect to it. There's a lot of mystical things that show up in that movie. It's a very interesting movie. But throughout that movie, it gives us a glimpse into the usage of Ish and Adam, Ben Adam, son of Adam, as opposed to Ben Ish, son of any man.
Right.
Well, Cain was a man, an Ish, but Seth and Abel were Ben Adam. They were the sons of Adam. So it's the aspect of when we see Adam showing up in Torah is it's pointing to this is a man that's descended directly from Adam in a spiritual sense, not just a physical sense. Ish would be, yeah, you came from Adam, but you're nothing like the old man.
Right.
Adam is, you're a lot like the old man. You're a chip off the old block.
Right.
And so we see that here is the Adam is going to bring forth, because only Ben Adam be willing to bring forth and admit his faults, his sins, would be even more so want to bring forth a peace offering, want to bring forth a whole burnt offering. And when
Right.
we go back to those three types of offerings, we see the first whole burnt offering is with Noah. Oddly enough, it's Noah. Noah comes off the ark. He takes one of every clean animal and he offers up a whole burnt offering. And we see no reason, no correlation, no nothing as to why.
No sin.
The sin issue's been dealt with. That was the flood.
Right.
Noah comes off the ark and he presents a whole burnt offering, and we don't really have good insight there. The second time we see a whole burnt offering, oh, that's with Abraham. And God said, Abraham, bring me your son. Well, which one? Your only son? Well, they're both the only sons of their mother. The son that you love. Well, that's all that I have, God. Yes. Bring all that you have and present it as a whole burnt offering. But this is me. This is mine. You gave this to me as mine. This is all that represents me. This is all that I am. Okay. And Abraham offers up everything that God gave him, everything that is rightfully Abraham's, and he gives it up freely. And that's our whole burnt offering. And then from God's perspective, the next one, if we want to put it on a tier, the next layer down, shlemim. What is a shlemim? Glad you asked. Because the first time we really get a shlemim is Mount Sinai, Exodus chapter 20. God comes down in a cloud, covers the mountain. All the warnings and lightnings and the flashes and everything else, and he gives us the 10 utterances, the 10 commandments. And we stand back and we say, Moshe, I can't hear anymore. I'm going to die if I hear anymore. I can't believe I'm still alive after seeing seeing nothing but hearing God. God is in my midst. I'm in the presence of God. He's talking. I can't stand it anymore. I'm going to die. Moshe, you go get the words. You bring them back. We will do what you say, and we will listen to what you say. And
Right.
so Moshe gets closer to the mountain. He doesn't go up the mountain yet. He goes closer to the mountain, and he gets a fuller explanation. And what we hear from chapter 21 of Exodus to about chapter 23 is more of an in-depth explanation of each one of the 10 commandments with some added on stuff. And then God says, Moshe, you come up. I'm going to give you these written in stone, in tablets. But before Moshe goes up, he gathers all the people around there at the mountain. He builds an altar, and he tells the young men, odd thing, teaching for another time, the young men, bring forth some bulls for a shlemim, a peace offering. They slaughter the bulls. Moshe takes half of the blood, sprinkles it on the altar. Again, this is before Vayikra. This is before we get any instructions on how to do any of this. Moshe sprinkles it on the altar, and then he takes the other half of the blood and he sprinkles it on the people. And we read, Moshe reads from the Sefer Habrit, the book of the covenant. Wait a minute, Moshe, you haven't written Deuteronomy yet. Nothing's happened. Where'd you come up with this book? The sages go into great discussions on that. Where is this book? What is this book? What was he reading from? He reads the Brit. He reads the wedding covenant. But it was the peace offering that brought about the wedding covenant. It wasn't a sin offering. It wasn't the Olah. It was the peace offering. Now, once you're in the covenant and you violate aspects of it, now you bring the sin offering. You have to be in the covenant to be worried about sin of the covenant. That brings about a completely different aspect. This is why Judaism looks at Christianity rather odd. What do you mean you need to bring a sin offering? You're not in the covenant yet. What relationship do you have with God right now? Christianity says you have no relationship with God without a sin offering. Judaism says, no, you got to have a relationship with God before you need to worry about the sin. You mean there's grace and mercy before the new covenant?
Exactly.
Yeah, grace and mercy was always there. Always there.
Exactly.
So throughout these three types of categories, these three types of offerings, we see that the chatat is, I transgressed in the garden. I took something that wasn't mine. I violated. I went past the boundary. And now, God, I'm offering something of mine to you. And if you read the conditions of the sin offering in our Torah portion, who gets to eat of this? Nobody. I'm sorry. The Kohanim get to eat a piece of it. But here's the tricky thing about the sin offering. Only parts of it is placed on the altar. Parts of it the priests get. The rest of it goes outside the camp and is burned outside the camp. The priest, you can see, is something of a representative of God, kind of like an ambassadorship. I'm representing God here. I'm speaking for God. So I'll take a little bit, but you don't get any of it. Why? Well, because you transgressed. You went over the line. You stepped in an area that you weren't allowed. Then we get to the shlamim. Shlamim is the peace offering. Shlamim is the one that the covenants are based on. This is where we both come together. The shlamim, I get to eat some of it. The priests get to eat some of it as a representative of God, and some of it goes up on the altar, and it rises up. We all enjoy. We're almost equal participants in this.
You mean co-creators?
But just bear with me. If you can say we're equal in any aspect, we're almost equal participants in this because we all enjoy this meal, and it's a covenantal type meal. It's not based on sin. It's not based on my standing, your standing, anything else. We're coming into an agreement. The Olah is different. The Olah is based on a sense of awe. Have you ever looked up in the stars and you go, oh my goodness, it's so large, it's so big. But even from here, we don't understand and appreciate the intricacies of it. You look at your own flesh, and you're not really at awe until you start delving into it. And when you get at the microscopic level of the blood cell, and you see the blood cell, and you got red blood cells and white blood cells, then you go even deeper, and you get into the DNA and how everything works together. And it's like, oh my gosh. On the surface, it looks like nothing, but once I get close to it, there's so much here that this couldn't have happened by accident. This is not happenstance. I'm in awe of this creation. I'm in awe of the stars. I'm in awe of the world that is presented to me. I am nothing. I have nothing to offer, but all that I have and all that I can even farcically claim as mine, I offer that up to you, God, in total awe of you. And that's the Olah. And so God sees us from the Olah, then the Shlamim, and then the sin. Man is always focused on the sin first because we are always inadequate. That's Vayikra. Look at it from God's perspective, things change. Look at it from man's perspective, and sometimes we get wrapped around the sin and the sacrifice and certain things because the prophets say, all of the prophets say, repent and return.
Well,
They don't talk about a sacrifice. Repent and return.
Right. It's the focal point, or the coming from where? God coming down to us going up to God. That's the reason for in my opinion, for the inverse in the way things are laid out. And it's time to get going. So I just wanted to say that the article that I mentioned also talks about Rashi and sacrificial laws and why God spoke to Moses. He called him first as a sign that he cherished him. However, it is only there regarding offerings that Scripture mentioned that he called him. So it goes into why. So if anybody wants to read it and go any deeper. Glad to have you. This is 2.5 Opinions. I'm Frank. Jesse, is there anything in the chat room that needs to be said or done? Or
No, actually, the chat room has actually been rather quiet this go around.
okay,
I guess people were either A, too confused about what we're saying, or B, which I will say A is probably my fault, or B, we actually hit it on the head well enough that someone understood what was being said.
Yes, when I've taken away everything else and there's nothing else to take away, then I've created the masterpiece. That wasn't that. Who was it that said that was Michelangelo or Da Vinci? Said when there's nothing left to be removed, then that is the masterpiece that lies behind in his paintings and sculptures and such. Anyways,
I think it might have been Michelangelo.
I lost everybody. So I'm not the Rebbe. Shabbat Shalom.
Jesse?
Shabbat shalom, I'm Mishai.
Okay.
2.5 Opinions, have fun. See you next time.
I'm Frank, the Irreverent One. Shabbat Shalom, Lehitrot, Shavuot. See you later. Next week. Next week, maybe not. Depends. I got to go TDY this week. So take care.